Hi, and welcome to Circle Time Magazine. I am one of your hosts, Sophie Biddle. Circle Time Magazine is a professional development talk show for educators. This is a special season of Circle Time talking all about supporting school-age children.
Hi, Sophie. I'm so excited to join you. I'm Sheely Mock, and I'm excited to be your co-host. This is a time for us to gather and have time for us to learn and grow together. So this season, we're looking at high-quality practices with an expanded age range. We'll be focusing on supporting school-age children and expanded learning opportunities, or ELO programs. ELO programs include spaces where children go before school, after school, or summer. Many providers serve both early childhood and school-age children. And right now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many ELO programs have expanded their services. So some providers are serving school-age kids for the first time, and other ELO programs are serving school-age kids all day and having to support remote learning. This season, we'll review practices to support both experienced and new ELO providers.
Thanks, Julie. So today we are talking all about creating safe environments. For this episode, we're defining safe environments as spaces that are anti-bias, anti-racist, and culturally responsive. This is consistent with how safe environments are defined in both early childhood and school-age care settings. Safe environments focus on the well-being of everyone involved to create a sense of belonging. Today, we'll hear from children, researchers, and providers about why safe environments matter for learning and engagement. Then we'll review activities, materials, and facilitation skills you can implement in your program to create a space where all children feel safe to be their true selves.
So our learning objectives today are to understand that safe environments are the foundation for learning and engagement. Everyone needs to feel safe, heard, and seen in order to actively participate in your program. We'll identify strategies for promoting a sense of safety and belonging for your program participants. And then lastly, we'll explore connections between anti-bias, anti-racist, and culturally responsive practices in creating safe environments. So a key tenet of ELO programs is to center youth voice and empower youth leadership. We'll go into more depth on this later in the season. You may remember Sadie from her role as kid correspondent in earlier seasons of Circle Time. For this season, we're delighted to have Sadie return along with her sister Gabby as our junior hosts. So let's welcome them to this space and kick off our Youth Voice segment.
Hi, I'm Saylise.
Hi, I'm Gabby.
And welcome to our Youth Voice segment. Today we're talking about safe environments.
We have two guests with us today. Can you please say your names and what grade you're in?
Hi, I'm Kai. I'm in 12th grade.
Hi, I'm Kat, and I'm in 4th grade.
Welcome! Okay, thank you for coming. And so we have a few questions for you guys to just answer however you feel like it.
What does a safe place mean to you, and why is it important?
A safe place to me is a place I can feel seen and heard, and I have a good relationship with those around me.
A place where I feel safe would probably be somewhere where I know there's someone I trust. If anything bad happened, they would help me.
So why is it important?
It's important to me because if I want to perform my best, I need to feel comfortable in the place I'm in and the people I'm around.
I think a safe place for me is a place where it's physically safe, like there's like alarms and stuff, and it's mentally safe, where it's like you won't feel so stressed over like how much work and how mean everybody is and how scared you are of being yourself. And I think that's very important because it can affect the way that you work.
How do adults help you feel safe to be yourself?
I think when I can bond with a teacher over like any topic, that helps me feel like I'm like a lot more comfortable around them because there's something there that we connect through.
I think whenever they pay attention to me, I think that is one of the most important things, and like Kai said, bonding with them and having a good relationship with them.
Like actually being able to bond with them over like whatever you're learning about, or them being able to help you instead of them asking you to figure it out, because it makes you feel like more empowered to do well in class.
I feel like adults could help me feel safer is how if adults actually knew me, like sometimes they had certain talks about how what they're like and what they do like.
What can a safe after school program look like?
I think a safe after school program would be small groups. So we're closer together and it's easier for the teacher to focus on us, or we can have a little bit better independent time as well because we're in a small group.
I think of a bunch of different age groups again, and space. That's another important thing. And I also like space for doing homework.
I think it's very important because, yeah, you're probably learning something all the time, but it's better if you like actually have a lesson plan and have free time, because then it balances it out.
What advice would you give to teachers or counselors on how to help you feel safe?
I would say I would need a teacher to be more understanding sometimes of, the situations that we go through, and just finding something to bond with your student over, so they feel like they can be 100% themselves, like in whatever space they're in with you.
I'd say they should talk to students more and bond, like I said. But like they should know what's going on. Like most of the times, if there is a problem, and they're the one bothering other people, there is a lot more going on.
Yeah, especially like how both of you said, it's like teachers being more aware of how their students are feeling and like checking in to see how everybody's doing, because mentally being prepared is also the same as physically being prepared, even though we're doing school digitally.
I want to add one more thing to advice I'd give to a teacher. I'd say have check-ins with your students like every so often. So just like checking in with whatever schoolwork, like how they're feeling. I think if that is done on a weekly basis, I think that can really help the relationship between a student and teacher.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you, teachers and everybody that's watching, for watching our youth segment.
Bye. Bye.
We've talked about safe environments before on Circle Time. If you've joined us for past seasons, you know that safe environments include both emotional and physical safety. In this episode, we're focusing on ways to take practices you've already been implementing and stepping them up for school-age children. We'll also be offering new practices to consider that support children's well-being at all ages. There are numerous definitions and frameworks for anti-bias, anti-racist, and culturally responsive environments. We're drawing from a few, including the Washington State Core Competencies for Child and Youth Development, researchers Costin and Tracy Bronson, and the Gary Howard Equity Institute, to share what we mean when we talk about safe environments.
Yeah, so specifically, safe environments are explicitly anti-bias and anti-racist. This means we're engaging children in deeper ways where they get to learn and be themselves fully without ever giving up who they are. All of us hold multiple identities, are part of social groups, and have intricate personal backgrounds that are worthy of dignity and respect. In order for us as providers to support impactful learning, we must recognize that we play a role in systems of oppression that are in place all around us. We must commit to continuous learning so that we can best support all of the children that we work with. Safe environments are also culturally responsive. This means providers are sensitive and aware of children's cultural backgrounds. There are materials which reflect diverse cultures, languages, and experiences in our program spaces, and there are connections to children's family and community resources. Ultimately, when we create anti-bias, anti-racist, and culturally responsive spaces, we're supporting the basic human right to belong. Taking steps to be anti-bias, anti-racist, and culturally responsive results in immense gains for children, particularly children most negatively impacted by systematic oppression. Creating safe spaces that value respect, inclusion, and diversity increases the quality of your program and helps all children to be more compassionate, involved community members.
So again, all of us are really on different steps of our anti-bias and anti-racism journeys. This is an ongoing process. So we encourage you to join us today with just an open heart and an open mind. Many of these practices will be simple additions that you can weave into your work with children and families. One example of a foundational practice for creating culturally responsive environments is taking time to co-create a program culture that is reflective of the children in your program. One way to create a clear program culture is to have program agreements that everyone, providers, families, kids, everybody, are held accountable to. This is an easy activity and behavior management tool that can be applied in both early childhood and school age care programs. One example is here from Blazing Trails in Seattle. This program serves kids ages 5 to 12 years old. You can see here that they have 3 sets of rules, or the 3 reasons that they have rules. The first is to keep our feelings safe, the second to keep our bodies safe, and the third to keep property safe.
Yeah, this poster with the reasons we have rules is such a great way to create and communicate a program culture. It's transparent and explicit about the ways everyone in that space is expected to engage with each other. So let's listen, Sophie, to Jennifer and Rita from Blazing Trails share about how this approach to creating a respectful program culture has worked for them.
All of the rules come from 3 basic expectations: that everyone's body is safe, everyone's feelings are safe, and everyone's stuff, their things, property is safe. And even the youngest children who, even those with attention issues or on the spectrum or whatever challenge they may have, can understand that, can connect with that, can then discuss whatever the challenge they had in those terms. Because that is so simple and central, everything revolves around that. Everything grows from that. So older kids can take that and run with it. And when you have kids that have ownership in the rules of our community, then everything ends up being better.
Even if older kids are talking about appropriate things for an older kid, but it could be violent, it could be a movie that they saw, but when we tie it into, there's kindergartners right next to you or first graders, how do you think they might be feeling about this movie that you're talking about? We have to protect their feelings too, and then they're like, okay, yeah, I get it.
I really loved getting to hear from Jennifer and Rita about the many different ways and reasons why having this Reasons We Have Rules poster works for them and really supports a program culture. I think for them at Blazing Trails that it made the most sense for that program to have the adults create the poster and share it with the children there. Another way to approach this activity would be to co-create those program agreements with the children in your program. This is something that all kids can participate in. To do this as a group, you might gather everybody and sit around and talk about how everyone wants to be treated. You can scaffold discussions to help children connect actions, feelings, and outcomes. So for example, with young children, you might sit them down and say, hey, have you heard the word respect before? What do you think it means? And I will guarantee you that preschoolers and young children have heard the word respect a lot and probably have a lot of feelings and thoughts about what the word respect means. And then maybe ask, how might we show respect to ourselves? How about to other people? How does it feel when someone treats us with respect? And then sort of lastly land on, should we make respecting ourselves and others an agreement here?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sophie, for sharing some of those examples and naming that young people have lots of thoughts and feelings at all ages about what respect looks like or what it means to them. And I think that's actually really important because a lot of times We might say you need to respect so-and-so, or you need to respect this space, but we don't actually talk about what that means or what that looks like or sounds like. And so if young people also have their very real opinions and thoughts about it, that might be quite different from what you're thinking respect means. So engaging in that dialogue is just a great way to help build a shared understanding in that shared culture. And then also, thinking about with older children, you can actually add complexity to these discussions, and you can ask older children maybe more directly, what community agreements do we want to have? Or how do we want to be in shared space or community with each other? Or go a little bit further into just ask, what commitments or expectations do we expect from each other? And then community agreements are especially powerful, and you mentioned this earlier, when they're co-created with children and adults, and that we're very clear that we are all held accountable to them, because this really helps to build buy-in. Agreements, they also can help us include, or they can also include strategies for how to repair harm or make amends when an agreement is broken, or our feelings are hurt, or maybe one of our something that is one of our belongings is damaged by someone else. And by creating the space for children and adults to co-create solutions and conflict management, we're able to, one, help avoid the concept of just straight punishment, and really support more this intentionality of we want to support a healthy and positive community space. And it also helps build that self-accountability. Children, once you create those group agreements, they can sign or draw on the agreements to indicate that they are agreeing to them. So we're not just kind of building them out and then assume that everyone's agreed. And having them posted in your space and referencing them regularly is going to be really helpful to reinforce that program culture. Then when conflicts happen and you reference them, it's not suddenly wait, what was that poster? What was that thing we talked about? But that it's part of our daily practice.
As a provider, make sure that you model the positive social behaviors that you and the kids in your program have identified as part of these program agreements. Showing you're holding yourself accountable to the same standards and expectations is foundational for relationship building. It also helps reduce challenging behavior and promotes a sense of belonging. As we are heard in the Youth Voices segment, children feel safer when there's a structure and clearly communicated set of expectations.
Let's take a look at the teaching pyramid, a framework often used in early childhood settings for high-quality teaching, and the social-emotional learning pyramid of program quality, a framework often used in school age and youth program settings. So we can see how high-quality practices for these age groups have a lot in common.
The social-emotional learning pyramid as a whole could really be housed inside of the all and some parts of the teaching pyramid.
Yes, and both pyramids emphasize that responsive relationships and safe environments are foundational for learning. All children and adults benefit from having positive relationships and feeling safe in their environment. This is especially important for people that have experienced trauma or toxic stress. Nurturing relationships and safe environments aren't a one and done activity. By consistently engaging in self-reflection, striving to build positive relationships, and implementing activities and facilitation strategies that cultivate a sense of belonging, you'll uplift your whole program.
Let's hear directly from student organizer, activist, and writer Azir Savage about how these foundational practices of nurturing relationships and safe environments are critical for learners of all ages, especially students of color. As you listen to this clip from Azir's talk about his book, You Failed Us, Students of Color Talk Seattle Schools, think about times that you felt welcomed and valued, and consider ways that you can help all children in your program feel connected, important, and seen.
And the tools that we came up with are radical welcome, radical support, and radical empower. Radical welcome, and all these are radical because when you're fighting against such a strongly ingrained racist system, you have to be radical about it. It can't be halfway done. It has to be all in and do it radically. So radical welcome is the idea that from the moment a student walks in your door on the first day, you welcome them. You ask them their name. You ask them how they are. You bring them into the room immediately, and you don't just do it that first day. You do it every day. you continue doing it. You continue bringing them in. You continue welcoming them. You continue making sure that they know that they are in that room for a reason and that they belong in that room. Radical support is really about building a relationship with your students so you know how to support them. Like, I get this question a lot from teachers who I talk to at my school about, like, how do I support a student going through a hard time when I barely know them? I'm like, well, your first mistake is that you barely know them. You need to build some sort of foundational relationship with your student so that, one, they can feel comfortable coming to you, and two, you feel comfortable coming to them. And of course you're gonna have a struggle with this if you don't know them. And so the first step of building that support is building that relationship so you can support. Another part of radical support is that it needs to be consensual. You can't force support on a student, and if they are clearly this is uncomfortable, you gotta take a step back, because if they don't want you in their business, you trying to get into their business is just gonna make things a lot worse. And the last piece of this, radical empowerment, we really worked in this workshop to reframe the idea of empowerment from giving someone power to giving someone a reason to see their own power and to understand that they already have the power, because you don't need to give them power because they already have it. They might not see it, but they have it. And this idea that teachers can do this in so many ways. They can do this through affirmations. They can do this through writing a little note on a test, you did a great job. I love those notes, a little smiley face. It makes you feel like you did something, and that you oh, I did that. I studied and I got this grade and I feel good about it. And you feel empowered, and it's not they're the ones needing to give you power, because you're oh, I just did that. I did it on my own, and I can continue doing that. So I think that those for me, and I'm sure I'll think of more later on, but those for me I think are really great foundational tools to direct the way an educator educates, to make sure that students of color especially feel like they have a power in the classroom. And what I really like about those is that everyone's classroom is different. Everyone has a different relationship with their students. Everyone has a different environment of a classroom. So there isn't one blanket action people can take, but there are ways people can improve and to do it specifically for their classroom, for what they teach, but have some idea about what they should be aiming for.
Azura talks about radical welcome, radical support, and radical empower. I love this framework because these key ideas can be applied to any environment and any group of people. As providers, it's important to take time to think and reflect on your practices. Do I take the time to greet everyone by name? Do I make sure to circulate and ask everyone about their day, or get to know their interests or what they're thinking about right now? Intentionally taking time to really get to know the children in your program goes such a long way in establishing trust and safety.
Definitely. And sometimes too, I think we can forget about how big the little things are. Azura's example of getting a sticker or even just a good job on a project really made me think about the importance of offering supportive feedback and acknowledging children's efforts and contributions.
Exactly. And just remember, when we're providing that feedback, providing specific examples of children's contributions and creating opportunities for them to identify their feelings about their work or experience can build intrinsic motivation, self-esteem, and a sense of belonging.
Our featured guest today focuses his research on the supportive, empowering relationships that Azura just discussed and the impact that they have on mental health. Today, we're excited to be talking to Caleb Germanero. He is a PhD student in the Learning Sciences and Human Development program at the University of Washington. His current research interests focus on how to promote mental health equity in minority groups. Today, he's here to talk with us about how to promote well-being and authentic relationships across the age development spectrum. Welcome, Caleb. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Could you tell us just a little bit about you and what your research focuses on?
Yeah, I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, born and raised, and then went out back east to Philly to do school, undergrad and my first graduate degree there, and then moved out to Seattle to start up at UW. And so in year 3 of my PhD program at the moment. And my research like broadly encompasses how to design learning environments that focus on healing and well-being while addressing trauma.
Thank you, Caleb. It's so nice to have you here. And we just want to dive right in. So here, you mentioning your research on healing and well-being. Would love to hear how you define well-being and why is it important to think about or focus on well-being specifically in learning environments?
The word itself is an active verb. So kind of thinking of it in that sense that we need to continue to have a more dynamic understanding of what well-being looks like, because it looks different in different contexts, looks different for different people in different contexts, right? And who those people are and what they carry and bring with them into a space.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that connection between well-being and having a safe learning environment?
Yeah, I think all of us, when we're not safe, don't necessarily want to focus on or can't focus on what in a classroom at least is learning, right? Or teaching. One, the setup is not super great. If kids are sitting in the back, they may not be able to hear a teacher. So like just the design of the space hasn't changed in 150 years, but I want to say learners have changed in the last 150 years or so. So I think the way that trauma can show up in the classroom is really, it looks like students not wanting to learn, right? Or not wanting to, or being disruptive, or having adverse reactions to content, or leaving the classroom, or disruptive behavior, right? So, and a lot of that's criminalized in the classroom. And I think that more often than not, it's students who are like dealing with something, no matter what it is, and it's stigmatized, right, in the classroom and in schooling. So I think that's why like safety is really important, because if a student like feels safe, they can at least talk about what they're going through and like start that process of getting back to learning what content is being taught in the classroom. When in reality, like when students come into a classroom, they're also bringing in their whole world, right? So, and their whole world is not accepted in the classroom quite often. So that's where that like paradox kind of comes in, or that discontinuous like understanding of that students are also people who have lives outside of school, and so do teachers, right? So like everybody's bringing their worlds into a classroom, but just expected to focus on what's in the classroom, which doesn't work, right? So that, I think that's kind of where the safety component is important.
I know that you think a lot about consent and agency and child-led learning and having reciprocal relationships with young people. I'm wondering if you could give us an example of the impact of those child-led learning and opportunities or spaces.
Yeah, I think this gets back to like the safety component too, right? So like students who don't feel safe, in my opinion, in my experience, I don't think that they care to like give you themselves, right, as far as in the classroom, right, and give you their all as far as learning too, right? If they're not being acknowledged and their experiences are not being acknowledged, right? So think about it, they're bringing their cultures, they're bringing their language, they're bringing their understanding, they're bringing their families, they're bringing all these things into the classroom. And if they don't get to focus on any of that, it's going to be hard for them to want to engage with it, right? If they're not seeing themselves in the curriculum, they're not seeing themselves in the content, or I understand that we are in a society that is very structured as far as like what we can teach and what gets allowed. But teachers are also people, right? So they can like also work within the confines of like bringing themselves into the classroom. So I think that trust component is really important to the relationship building between the teacher and their students. I think it needs to be a bi-directional relationship, right? Where there's giving on either side as far as understanding what people are going through. And that just gets down to the foundational level of like well-being. Like it's a fluid thing. Like one day I, as a educator, could feel great. And the next day I could feel absolutely terrible because I have a disease that really changes day to day. So I think that that's really important to acknowledge with my students, like with the kids that I coach, like if I'm at practice, I'm like, and I'm not feeling great, I'm like, hey guys, like, I don't really feel that great today. Like, help me out when we're going through drills or whatever. I'll ask the older players who are like a little bit of the leaders on the team or in my position group, like, hey, I need your help on these drills. Like, are you cool with this? And they're like, yeah, like, and asking if they're cool with it. Otherwise, I'll ask one of the coaches, right? I think that's really important, just the ability to ask for help for educators to ask students for help. Because if you ask a young person to help, the amount of times that they'll say yes is way greater than the times that they'll say no. But just giving them that choice is really important to that trust building type of connectedness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a really great leadership opportunity too, to say like, hey, owning how you are and showing up as a person, and then also handing the reins to them and saying like, hey, like we can do this together, and I see your capacity for leadership and engagement in this space by helping with drills or with little kids, passing out snack or maybe helping clean up art. There's lots of different ways that we can engage kids depending on the context.
Right. And that gets at the agency, the self-determination of the students, right? It gets at all these things that where they get to build these skills and the teacher just facilitates, right? They're just like, okay, you seem to really like this. Like, why don't you go do it? Like, are you okay doing this? And they're like, yeah, you see kids when they get geeked about something, they're like super, super motivated to do it. And it's like, how do we continue to tap into that interest and motivation for kiddos to just keep pursuing and keep learning and keep doing, right? And that's kind of where I try and situate myself, at least.
I'm just curious what your advice would be to other adults that are working with kids and in a variety of spaces, either, a formal teacher setting, after school setting, coaches, if they are sort of struggling with how to show up authentically in their program, like what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think outside of just like letting your kids know that you are also human and also somebody who gets nervous in certain situations or shows up in the way that they end up doing activities with their students, right? Or doing it first and then modeling and showing, right? And I know a lot of teachers do that type of stuff, but I think what's important is like understanding that the students are also experts in their own experience, right? They know when they're uncomfortable, they know when they don't feel safe, they know when, and they may not have the language to put and name all of those things, and that's also okay, right? Like, we need to normalize that communication looks really different across cultures, across ages, across identities, and comfortability in communicating those things also looks really different. So I know that it's again, like, we ask a lot of educators to understand, or providers, right, to understand what kids are going through, and I mean, that's what we signed up for, right? And I think that it's practicing it on ourselves too, of being able to like because if I understand what emotions I'm going through and what they look like in me, I should be able at least a little bit better to identify or try and assume what students may be feeling in the moment. I'm not going to assume like what they've been through or things like that. But I think trying to like educate myself on what these things look like, how trauma shows up in the classroom, how community like determinants of health like show up in the classroom, like what does that look like? Because school is not mutually exclusive from the rest of the world, and schools are sites of oppression, right? Like, at the end of the day, that's what they are, and a lot of spaces of that sort with that dichotomy and that power dynamic are that. And so like understanding how well-being could look in a classroom. I don't think we've seen a full classroom of people who are healthy, and so it's really hard to imagine what it could look like. And that's okay, I think, in my mind, because I think we have a long way to go. But I don't think we've seen a school that's like full of healthy, psychologically healthy people who aren't experiencing anything. So I think that's also like a call to the fact that we're always going through things, and providers as well, educators as well. So acknowledging that with your students is really important too. Because I mean, like, you can act like you have every day is a good day, but you can also show up and be like, yeah, today's not a good day and I'm doing my best. And your students will probably be like, understandable. Like, I don't feel good today either, you know? So it's a little bit of a relationship building process too. Just being honest and true to yourself and others.
Yeah, that just makes me think of like toxic positivity, right? And just how important it is to just create space and permission, give permit, like set permission to be able to just be where you are at, and that it's not always okay. Any advice you would give to providers who maybe are unsure of how to move more to a child-led space, or child-led learning and program setting? Could also be like just related to that showing up authentically, but I think also just that centering of young people in space, especially given part of the way you named it, schools being places often of oppression, or their set curriculum, or we live in sort of very structured spaces. So yeah, just any advice for providers to how to shift to centering children and young people?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question that is also a little bit like convoluted to answer in different ways, just because it's like so broad. But I think there's different elements that folks can address, right? It's like it's okay to be nervous in this situation. I think that like marks that you're human, and you care about it also, right? It's not a negative thing to be nervous about switching to this, because you do have to work within confines a lot of the time, and your job is tied to it. And I think that's it sucks, right? At the end of the day, and that you're tied to like producing things for a capitalistic society. But at the end of the day, like relationships are not a requirement of that structure, right? So that's where I think a lot of things can be designed around relationships building and trust building, because that's not a requirement, but it's also not a thing that folks are like tested on or rewarded for. Even focusing on that and moving through that and having that be a focus of on yourself, like having a good relationship with yourself will allow you to have a better relationship with other students and people. I think that again is really hard. It's easy to say, right? And it's a process. So I think understanding that it's not going to be a one quick fix, and this whole well-being discussion is super, super broad, dynamic, and I'm only like scratching the surface or giving really, really specific examples to my own experience. So not to say that it's not generalizable or applicable to other people's experiences, but I think that there's a lot that we can do as educators to make schools and learning spaces safer, more comfortable, and a place where people want to be daily, right? That allows them to not like get away from what they may be going through, but like at least have what they're going through acknowledged, surfaced, or allow them the space to like go through some of it in a classroom. Schools should be safe, and I think that's like the bottom line.
I think that is an excellent note to end on, and we definitely agree. Caleb, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts and your research, and also just about your life and really just being here with us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Wow, that was really just such a powerful interview. It was so nice to hear from Caleb. So much of that just really resonated with me, but especially this idea of being aware of power dynamics as adults in the space when working with children, but also still making sure to model appropriate vulnerability, and that's just so critical for authentic relationship building.
Yeah, and like Caleb emphasizing just the fact that we cannot learn if we don't feel safe. And then thinking about the way you framed well-being as an active verb also just makes me, it resonates with Azure's concepts of a radical welcome, radical support, radical empower. Like those are all very active things that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And just again, that like environments include those relationships. And that even when we've got a kiddo that might be a little bit challenging for us, to just really just take a step back as the adult facilitator in that space and understand that challenging behavior can and often is an indicator that children aren't feeling safe, and making sure that we're really considering how that they're coming in as like a whole person into the classroom, and holding space and acknowledging that there may be some instability or sense of not feeling safe outside of the program, and making sure that we're just always holding ways to make sure that our relationship with them is safe and our environment for them is a place where they feel safe.
Absolutely. And then remembering that that safety is so much tied to how much young people can bring their whole selves. The way Caleb talked about how so many spaces young people are leaving their identities at the door. And frankly, as adults, often we are going into our workspaces and having to leave much of our whole selves outside. And so really taking that risk and vulnerability to be more authentic, and then to really examine our spaces of how are we supporting all of the identities that our young people hold and that we hold, and creating space that fosters that and allows us to have that freedom to be our whole selves in a space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now we invite you to pause and reflect. Let's see some high quality programs in action. It is time for 2-minute tips. 2-minute tips are quick, simple, research-based strategies for ELO and early childhood professionals. Each tip contains a short introduction, a strategy linked to research-based outcomes, and provides short practice tips for implementation, along with a video of the strategy in action. So every tip opens with an explanation of the practice up here. And here you can read about the benefits of leading appreciation activities and practicing gratitude in your program. Underneath the explanation, there will always be some practice tips. We are going to dive deeper into some of these tips later on in the episode, especially this idea of making an accomplishment board. But every 2-minute tip will have these practices here. You can immediately implement in your program as you see fit. And then each 2-minute tip also has a video of an ELO program doing one of these practice tips super well. It's a great way to get to see this practice in action. So let's go ahead and watch Village Theater as they do a shout out circle to close their day at theater camp.
So this one, I think we're going to do kind of some specific shout outs. So something specific that you noticed today that you want to say thank you to someone for. So I'll start and I'll just point to someone, say thank you for something specific, and then they'll point to someone else. This also takes a lot of courage to be able to really to name that. And I saw everybody really doing fantastic things today. So when you pick somebody, maybe pick somebody that hasn't been picked yet. Not everybody will get to be. We won't get to do the whole circle. So I want to thank everyone, but I want to thank Satara, because I could tell she was really, you were really focused to get the script written so that your group would finish that today.
Can I add, can I say if you've been thanked, put your hand on your head so that we can try to find someone new to thank in case someone hasn't been thanked yet? Can you add that? Thank you.
I want to thank Anne because she was like the one who started us on like focusing, like she made us focus. I want to thank Sophie because she put out some really good ideas for our scene.
I want to thank Brooke when I was presenting problems that I saw in the scene that they showed. She came up with some really smart solutions.
I want to thank Julia because she just has all the time awesome attitude towards things.
Very nice. All right. Well, I thank all of you for participating in that and being brave and giving a special shout out and for working so hard today.
The use of circles as a method for connecting has a long history of use in Indigenous communities and communities of color. It's important when we utilize such strategies that we honor and acknowledge the historical and cultural roots of these practices. We encourage you to take the time to build relationships with the Indigenous communities in your area and create opportunities for shared learning and connection. Sheely, what are your thoughts about this activity?
Thank you, Sophie. Yeah, this activity really reflects, I think, the opportunity to develop empathy or cultivate empathy skills, which is also a component in the program quality assessment or the pyramid of program quality that we referenced earlier. And just is a great way to help young people get to know each other, helps start to build that foundation of trust, particularly as we start, like if we reference the community agreements, having connections with each other helps build that like trust to share what we expect from each other, and then how to navigate when something goes wrong or we have to make amends.
So now it's time for Try It Out. So we heard earlier in this episode about how far acknowledgement and appreciation go in building relationships with children. There are many ways to bring regular appreciation activities into your program to help build a welcoming program culture. We saw Village Theater model one activity called an appreciation or a shout out circle, where everyone took turns acknowledging another person for upholding program agreements or hard work that day. Another way to cultivate a positive program culture is to create an I Spy wall. If you've watched Circle Time before, you may remember the Warm and Fuzzies jar activity from season 2 on positive behavior supports. An I Spy wall is one way to scaffold a Warm and Fuzzies jar for school-age children. So everyone, adults and kids, can use sticky notes and I spy someone for practicing program agreements, being a good friend, or an act of kindness. For example, you could say, I spy Sam for cleaning up snack area without being asked. This activity helps children practice writing, gratitude, and appreciation. At the end of every month or quarter, you can review the I Spy wall together as a group. You can talk about how it feels to appreciate other people and for other people to appreciate you. When the I Spy wall gets full, you can consider having children take home the I Spies about their good work. This can also be a really great tool for connecting with families. Letting families know about the I Spy note or sharing it with them is just a really great way to build rapport. Everyone really likes to know when their kid is doing something awesome.
Yeah, one thing really quick, Sophie, if I could just add to think about like watching as a staff of the I Spy wall, to really be aware of ensuring all young people are getting spied on and are being recognized on the wall, and to either encourage or like nudge others like, oh, you know, I actually saw so and so do this, and just really making sure, because it can also be hard if like certain young people in your space are getting all the I Spies and you have, you know, maybe a kiddo that hasn't gotten any yet. So as a staff, that's just something to be mindful of and sort of monitoring as time goes on.
Absolutely. And it can also be a really great activity as adults and facilitators in this space to take some time every day to sit down and really think about the kids that are maybe not showing up on the I Spy wall as much. Like we all have some kids that are a little bit, can be easier for us to recognize. And it's a really visual, concrete way for us to take a pause and acknowledge everybody in the program, because everybody does have strengths and important contributions to our community. Our second Try It Out activity is from Gleason. Gleason has many free lesson plans on their website that focus on championing the safety of LGBTQ students in K-12 education. These are fun, poignant lesson plans that can easily be used in an after-school program to promote a welcoming, safe culture. We're going to feature one of their K through 5th grade lesson plans today called the Garden of Kindness. This activity focuses on building empathy and friendship skills by talking about how bullying hurts and why being kind can help everyone grow. We will have a one-page tear-out version of this lesson plan in the Circle Time magazine print edition, which you can find on our website or in hard copy. So here you can see that we're on the Gleason website and that we are doing the Garden of Kindness activity. If you scroll down, you can see a picture of one option of a final product where everyone gets to contribute a flower to the Garden of Kindness. And again, we just really want to emphasize that this is all laid out already for you. There's some clear objectives. The Garden of Kindness is also a really great way to create a child-centered space. So decorating the program space with children's art that affirms positive social behavior can help build a sense of belonging and safety. Let's hand it over to Gabby and Sadalise to do a Let's Make It.
So in the magazine, we have included a question guide, which is a framework for analyzing any activity that you're doing with children to assess and make adaptations to ensure that that activity is culturally responsive to the identities and cultures of the children you're working with. So we've used this here when selecting materials and trying to make sure we have diverse perspectives and identities represented throughout our episode today. And we want to include it for you as a reference as you start to sift through the many different resources that we present, as well as any others that you find. And just some of the examples of the questions in the guide, there are also, we added questions given the COVID-19 pandemic to think about physical distancing adaptations you might need to make, or if there's materials where often like it suggests that young people share the materials, it gives you space to reflect on, okay, how can I do this within like new safety or cleaning protocols, as well as just questions for you to kind of question, what values are being represented or what cultural identities are represented in this activity or in this book I'm reading. We'll move into our book club section here in a moment. But just some guiding questions to help us really check our biases sometimes, because often we go for things that are familiar or things that we loved, but typically that will represent our cultural identities, which is great. And we want to make sure we're including activities and resources and materials that reflect all of the identities of our young people.
All right, here at Circle Time, we love to talk about books. Cozy areas and book corners are easily stepped up for use by school-age children by simply offering books at an appropriate reading level. In this season, we are going to feature 2 different types of books. The first is a read aloud book appropriate for all kids up to probably about 2nd or 3rd grade, but really anyone can enjoy these stories. And then the second book that we'll offer and talk about is a chapter book for older students that are more comfortable with about a middle reader level chapter book. I am so excited to have Sadalise back, and then also to welcome Avery for joining us for book club. So hi Sadalise, hi Avery.
Hi.
Thank you both so much for being here with us, and I am so excited to hear your thoughts about these books, and also for you to share your book club reflection questions with everyone. So let's jump in. Our very first book is a book called Just Ask. Be Different, Be Brave, Be You. And this is by Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. What did you 2 think about this book?
One thing I really liked about this book is how diverse they were with all the characters and how they had people from all different backgrounds and they all found something in common, which I thought was like very symbolic and more than just like a read aloud book and more of like it was a very middle school topic, but they just put it into a more book for younger kids. And I thought that was very great.
Yeah, and I really liked how it encourages kids to think deeply and like ask questions. And it explores different perspectives and different people, and it shows us things that we might know and be accustomed to, or we might not. And so it's just great that it teaches us and shows us to just ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that this book points out that a diverse community, just like a diverse garden, is really necessary for everyone to thrive. And it's a great book to read alongside the Garden of Kindness activity that we talk about in this episode too. So Avery, how about you start us off with our book club reflection questions that a teacher might ask after reading this book to their class?
Well, in the book, all the kids, they ask questions. So what question would you ask the kids in this book?
Awesome. Sadalise, how about you?
My reflection question would be, what would you want people to know about you?
Awesome. Those are both great reflection questions for this book. So our second book that we are reviewing in this book club is for older independent readers, and it is a chapter book called George by Alex Gino. Sadalise, do you want to start us off? What did you think of this book?
I think that it's so cool how she refers to herself as a girl in the book to prove to everybody, like, I may look like a boy, but I am a girl. And it's something that's like it's such a simple concept, but it's really hard for people to understand. And I think that it's very nice how they kind of put it into a chapter book that kids can understand.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really liked that. She calls herself Melissa and refers to herself with like feminine pronouns. And then all around her, she's called George, he, him, that kind of thing. And it just makes her more of a character, right? More relatable. And she also loves Charlotte's Web, which a lot of people do. So those are just like elements that, or steps that the author took to make her more of a person and less of a character, I think. And then it's just a sweet, touching story about this girl and her best friend, and she manages to find the courage to speak up and tell everyone that she's a girl.
It's such a great story of courage and friendship, and the character's so relatable. Like, I think that it's just such a really great way to walk in someone else's shoes, and again touches back to our ideas of creating a safe space where everyone can be their full selves and really belong. So Avery, do you want to start us off with a book club reflection question for this book?
Okay, so I really like how she speaks up and tells everyone. So how have you spoken up and made your voice heard?
My reflection question would be, when have you had the courage to help a friend? Because in the book, Melissa's friend is helping her out, and she's like helping her show everybody that she's a girl, and I think that that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, Avery and Cedalise, thank you so much for joining us for book club. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. I love both of these books. They both talk about the importance of celebrating differences and building friendships with people who are different from us. You know, sometimes in an effort to be inclusive, we can find ourselves overemphasizing how everyone is the same, and celebrating our similarities is important. And so is celebrating the many ways we are different and unique. So this is an invitation to see each person as a unique individual that we can love and appreciate for exactly who they are.
Well, it is almost time for us to wrap up our circle time together. As we wrap up, we invite you to pause and reflect.
Wow, I can't believe we've come to the end of our time already. We created this episode about safe environments because we wanted to communicate that safe environments are the foundation for learning and engagement. Everyone needs to feel safe, heard, and seen in order to actively participate in your program. We did that by exploring connections between anti-bias, anti-racist, and culturally responsive practices in creating safe environments. We heard from young people, researchers, providers, and activists about a variety of different strategies for promoting a sense of safety and belonging in your program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Water. Keep going, Lacey. I think it's so funny the way you're changing the words.